All right, y'all. I stumbled across this clip by complete accident. I saw this video pop up on my thumbnail. I was watching some videos from Cliffe when, like, the classic videos where he goes to universities and, has debates and stuff like that. And I guess this just popped up on my algorithm because of that. And I clicked on it and I randomly just clicked to 29 minutes and 46 seconds. I haven't watched any of the video. I just clicked to this part. And the question really just hit deeply in my spirit, and I wanted to share this with y'all. This man gets on the mic. It's a Q&A period, and he explains a situation where he lost his 18-year-old brother in a very tragic way. And he's a believer, and he's having trouble dealing with the loss of his brother, right? Let me just play the clip. I haven't watched the entire clip, but for whatever reason, I just kind of feel led to share this. So let's get into it.
Is it working? Yeah, okay. Hey guys, big fan. I know my name's Ridge. I'm here with my wife and my younger brother and some of our best friends. I know I ran into you two last night, but just want to elaborate on that a little bit about that tragedy and ask a question. And Charlie, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, but we lost our 18-year-old brother back in October to an accident in our front yard. And we're constantly told, like, oh, you guys might have to move on. You guys might need to kind of like put it in the past. It happened, get over it. And we do have really good days where we get to share his story and share the gospel. But with those good days, there's also some really, really bad days where anger comes out. And I mean, I might get mad at my wife. I might get mad at the family, at the kids. What's your advice and what do you have to say about how to cope with those really bad days that we have, all of us collectively being really close to him after his loss?
All right, I'm really sorry for your loss, brother. It stinks. And that's one of the reasons I'm so glad that in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul writes, death is the last enemy. I am sick and tired of hearing people say, oh, death is just part of nature, so just accept it. No, I don't accept death. That's why we fund hospitals. That's why we do medicine, because we are against death and we're for life. And that's what Jesus said. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. Second point. All right, wife and brother and family, you've heard the man say, I'm hurting. And at times I'm okay, but at other times I get really angry. Okay, he's been honest, right? He's been honest with all of us. He's been vulnerable. So now we got to be patient with each other, right? We got to love each other through the hard times, and it's a hard time you're passing through. The most difficult day of my life was when my 7-year-old niece was knocked into an early grave in a horrible car accident, and I had to go out to Madison, Wisconsin, where my brother, who's a transplant surgeon at UW-Madison, was transplanting kidneys and livers, and I had to walk with him around a field behind his home in Madison, Wisconsin. And he's pouring out his heart to me about the death of his 7-year-old daughter. And if anybody thinks they got an easy answer for that question, they're nuts. The honest answer first is, I do not know why the babysitter didn't see the stop sign, why she went right through the stop sign and a pickup truck at 55 miles an hour came careening down the road, smashing into the car, sending my 7-year-old niece into an early grave.
Wow.
I don't know why God allowed that to happen. And so therefore we got to be patient with each other. We got to love each other. We got to be committed to each other as we go through these painful, difficult times. The third point is, what's comfort? Comfort is presence. So you being together as a family with your presence is crucial. And even more important is God's presence with you, the presence of Jesus Christ. And that's where all of this talk and all of these answers to all these difficult questions gets real practical. It's not an issue of a good answer to a difficult question now. It's an issue of presence. I need you to be with me because I'm hurting. My loved one died and it stinks. And now all of a sudden faith becomes real personal because now it's an issue of, do I know the presence of God? And brother, I'm 70 years old, so you're a lot younger than me, and I'm still working on that. I want to know the presence of God because it's hard. And I was really ticked when Time magazine came out with Mother Teresa on the cover saying, oh, the woman struggled with doubt. See, she didn't really have real faith. Oh, baloney. Give me a break. There is such a thing as depression. There is such a thing as loneliness, as the snot gets kicked out of you by life. And so now we got to know Christ. And I find great comfort that in Philippians 3:10, Paul writes, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his suffering. Remember, you worship a suffering God who got the snot kicked out of him and he was nailed to a wooden cross. So you can connect with this God. This God can connect with you. He's a suffering God. And then ultimately, brother, we have the solution to suffering. We're going to go through good times. We're going to go through hard times in this life, and you're going through them now, both of them. And yet we have the ultimate solution for suffering and death. And that solution is eternal life in a heaven where there will be no more stillbirth, no more cancer, no more heart failure, no more little kids getting knocked into early graves by ridiculous car accidents, but eternal life in the presence of God. So come on, my atheist agnostic friend, let's go into the hospital. Come on, my atheist agnostic friend, let's go into the room where the baby lies, whose body's being shredded by terminal cancer. What are you going to do? You're going to wave your fist in God's face and blame God? That's a cop-out. That's misplaced blame. I, as a follower of Christ, will walk to the other side of that bed, and I too will hold that child's hand and seek to comfort that child. But in Jesus Christ, I've got a suffering God who gives a rip about death, about grieving people, who wants to comfort us and wrap his arms around us. That, my friend, is the solution to the very real problem of suffering and death. Jesus Christ.
Wow.
We'll take one or two more.
I'm gonna continue and play the rest of this Q&A session. They said they're gonna do one or two more questions, but just a couple things. Something that still blows my mind, and me being a Christian for however long I've been a Christian, I don't know the exact number of years. It's still relatively new in comparison to, other people, and in comparison to my age. Maybe between like 5 and 7 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 8 years. The concept of a suffering God is still such a wild concept for me to even wrap my head around. Why would God suffer? You know what I'm trying to say? Do you understand the level of love that God has for us to suffer for us, to endure so much pain for us? Because in all honesty, he didn't have to. He didn't have to, but he did. Because he loved us that much that he was willing to suffer for us, literally die for us. That is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing. And then also something that he said, and I promise we'll get back to this in a second. Something that he said also was, we don't accept death. That's an amazing point that I don't hear people say enough. Even myself. Because death was never the plan. The plan was life. But because of sin entering into the equation, the only way to defeat sin once it entered into the equation is death. Jesus had to die. And then guess what? He defeated death by raising again and coming back to life on the third day. But death is necessary to defeat sin. But that doesn't mean that we accept it. Because just like he said, we serve a God who said that he came to give us life and life more abundantly. The enemy says that he came to steal, kill, and destroy. There's a difference. And I think everyone's going to go through hard times in our lives, whether you're going through a hard time right now, you've been through a hard time in the past, or you will go through a hard time in the future at some point in time. We have to cling on to that hope of eternal life that we have. We have to cling on to that personal relationship that we have access to in Jesus Christ. That's the only way we're going to get through these hard times that we are going to face here on earth. But let's continue.
Thank you. My name is Darlene Swaffer. Beautiful explanation earlier about the foundation of our country. Under the Trump administration, the 1776 Commission was really focused on instilling patriotism for students. And I wanted to know your thoughts on a new agenda. I think it's called Project 2025, where many conservative organizations were focusing on the solution of helping Americans understand the true goal of how our country is supposed to serve us. What are your thoughts on that agenda or that project?
Yeah, we're one of the listed organizations on Project 2025. I don't know all the details. The Democrats are losing their minds over this thing. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's actually like her core message right now. It's not officially part of the campaign. That's important to note. It's a 900-page document. I haven't read it. I don't think anyone's going to read it. But yes, if the essence is to bring back patriotic education, I was on the 1776 Commission.
I want to see what Cliffe is going to say specifically. I didn't really click on it for the political reasoning.
Why we go after college students is because they weren't prepared, like you put beautifully, they weren't prepared by their parents in high school. And that's not just because they weren't given the intellectual tools to defend their faith. That is one of the biggest, but it's prepared 80%.
In God's design to help them college years.
Okay, sorry. This is on the fly, y'all. I'm sorry. Like I said, I literally just clicked on it and I was like, geez, this is a heck of a part to just click on. What was his question?
Thank you, Charlie. And so good to meet these others that are here. I had dinner with George Barna not too long ago, and I said some of the biggest concerns. I pastor just outside of Detroit, and I realized that it's hard to keep college kids engaged. It's a hard demographic to reach, and it seems like my pastor friends are all asking the same question. Yeah. So I asked George Barna, I said, what is the solution? He said, you think you're losing them in the college years, but you're losing them much earlier. The worldview is developed by the time they're 11. So knowing God designed 3 institutions, but he gave the responsibility to parents to rear their children. How do these 3 institutions come alongside parents in God's design to help them establish a biblical worldview in their children before they're 11?
It's a really good question.
Yes, 75% of Christian high schoolers turn away from the faith when they go to college. Fortunately, 40% come back after college. But that 75%.
He said 75% of Christian high schoolers turn away from faith in college. That's crazy. But sadly enough, in this environment that we live in, I could believe it, but that's absolutely insane.
Astronomical in my mind. And the reason why we go after college students is because they weren't prepared, like you put beautifully, they weren't prepared by their parents in high school. And that's not just because they weren't given the intellectual tools to defend their faith. That is one of the biggest, but it's also often because their parents didn't mentor them, especially the father of the household. They didn't mentor their child, and they didn't show their child what objective right and wrong is. The reason why 80% of pastors' kids turn away from the faith and never come back to the faith is because their fathers, who are the pastors usually, spend more time with the congregants than they do their kids, and they also don't practice what they preach. I'm fortunately one of the 20% who has retained my faith because my dad has done a fantastic job practicing what he preaches and spending a ton of time with us. He actually was invited by endless amounts of organizations to speak all over the country and internationally, but he chose, because of his love for me and my brothers, to actually become a pastor and to spend time with us and not just leave us and travel all over the country and internationally. So I think it starts with the father, absolutely the mother, and it starts with that mentoring process, loving them and giving them a firm foundation of what is true, right, and wrong, like the founders of our country clearly did. With liberalism now, you clearly see that there's no objective right and wrong. So what do? They come out screaming, and they don't even know what they're screaming about. They don't know what's right or wrong, and they're just screaming, and oh yeah, drug use is healthy for you. And they just go on and on down the line, and it just becomes a total, excuse my language, poop show. And so that's one way. I won't speak to the government side and some of these other institutions because this is our kind of lane, but really loving, mentoring, and then giving the intellectual tools to defend their faith, which is not that hard because in the philosophical realm, about 50% now, and it's growing, of philosophers at the top schools are saying there is a God. 20 years ago, it was 10%.
Wow.
Now we have to go up to the religious departments because you would think the religious departments are pretty high in their belief of God and teaching it. No, they're not. They're the opposite. Even in the Bible Belt schools, like we were just at Mississippi State, some of the nicest professors I talked to, and yet they were secular liberals in the Bible Belt. And they were in the religious departments saying, oh no, maybe there's a higher power, but let's be agnostic. So pushing back against them is important.
I would just say this, that we need, and it's very fixable, we need a renaissance of homeschooling, and not just sending your kids to private school, but
Okay. That's it. That's all I wanted to show y'all, for real. Specifically that part about suffering, why bad things happen, trying to make sense of it, and ultimately how you deal with it. I feel like his explanation is very helpful, very useful, and it's something that we're all gonna have to face at some point in our life, you know? So let me know what you think. Get in my comments, like this video. I'm out, y'all.